All right, chapter 2, we didn't get very far, but there's a lot of background information that we were looking at to better understand this next scene in the story. And so, as we remember, Naomi and Ruth, the Moabitess, have returned to Bethlehem just at the right time, the time of the beginning of the harvest, the barley harvest. And now we have in verse 1 of chapter 2 a little bit of foreshadowing, the literary technique where we have essentially the answer to the problem of this story introduced before the characters themselves connect with Boaz. We've been introduced to him and some things said about him. Obviously, he is a kinsman. He's from the family of Elimelech. Not only that, he is a Gibor Hayil, which is a mighty man of strength. Many suggest that indicates his wealth. I mentioned last week, I think it also would indicate he's a man of standing. I'm not sure I want to just confine it to wealth, but that he's a man of standing in the community, perhaps one of the elders, and someone who has a great reputation. And of course, he fits into this concept of levirate marriage that we talked about briefly last time. Somebody help me out there. What is the levirate marriage, and how does that potentially help with the situation of Naomi and Ruth?
It's where family steps up, a brother.
Yeah, very good. The lever is the Latin word for the brother-in-law. So the levirate marriage is the brother-in-law marriage. And we went back to Genesis and saw an example of that where Judah had 3 sons, and his oldest was married to a Canaanite woman, Tamar. God killed his oldest son, and so then the brother married her, and then God killed him as well. And so the third son was available, and yet Judah didn't want to risk this third son also being killed. And we have that whole scenario where Tamar dresses up like a prostitute to get justice, essentially. She needs someone to provide for her. And I mentioned we looked at that narrative because we're going to return to that idea in chapter 4. So we see that Elimelech is introduced, and he could be the solution because he is from the family of Elimelech. Boaz can then perhaps at least serve in the function of the levirate marriage. Another thing we looked at here was the gleaning laws as Ruth comes to Naomi. And remember, this is going to be a terrible recognition for Naomi. A person of standing in the community now is going to have to take advantage of laws that were set up for the orphan, the widow, the stranger, which means she's going to have to acknowledge that she's basically destitute. And no doubt that's going to be a hard thing for her to do. Ruth comes and asks permission to go glean, in other words, to take advantage of the laws. And you'll remember, of course, that in the book of Deuteronomy, there's another text in Leviticus as well. You're not to go across your field and pick up the scraps that you may drop when you're bringing the harvest in. You're not to go back over your vines a second time. You're not to go back over your trees a second time. Whatever's left after you go through the first time is going to be left for anyone who needs food to eat, and they can come into your field. They have permission to come and to take those things. And so Ruth is going to take advantage of that. And then our final part of chapter 2 was verse 3. Remember the very interesting way the author indicates how Ruth got into Boaz's field. Looking there, the text makes it look like she stumbled into the field. You know, she just happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz. But the Hebrew's even better. It chanced, namely her chance, or in other words, her chance chanced upon the field. Now, what did we say about that? Does the author really want us to think this was totally accidental? What's he sort of pointing to?
God did it.
Yeah, I mean, this is God's plan all along. Now, I didn't say this last time, but this certainly fits into the ancient Near Eastern way of thinking. You've heard of the casting of lots before, I'm sure. And whatever that exactly was, we don't know, but it was maybe something like throwing dice and they come up a certain way. Would you typically think that throwing dice is sort of a game of chance?
Yeah.
You typically would. But in the ancient world, they believed that God was in control of the casting of the lot, so that however the lot came up actually revealed his will. And so this is in some ways put in that context of a game of chance, but it's no chance at all. This is God leading Ruth to the very field of the person who perhaps is going to be able to solve the problem for these two widows. So let's pick up again now in chapter 2, verse 4, and I'll read the text that I read last week, but we didn't get to, and we'll see how far we can make it. So, verse 4, Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, May the Lord be with you. And they said to him, May the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, Whose young woman is this? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, She is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. And she said, Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. Thus she came and has remained from the morning until now. She has been sitting in the house for a little while. All right, so what we're going to see at this part of the story, and really it will continue through chapter 2 and through chapter 3, and that is we're going to begin looking at the character. I don't mean in terms of being a character in a story. I mean the integrity, the moral character of these two main protagonists in the story, Boaz and Ruth. So let's think about Boaz's character for a moment. We've already been told that he is a mighty man of strength. He's a man of reputation. Anything about the way he interacts with his workers in verse 4 that may kind of point us to seeing him in a very positive light as a man who has stellar character or a man of integrity? What do you think?
He seems like he was good to his workers.
All right. And it's only implied, but it's because of the way he greets them and they greet him. What it looks like when you read it is that this is sort of a daily occurrence. In other words, this is a habitual thing, that when he comes to them, he says to them, May the Lord be with you. And they answer immediately, May the Lord bless you. It seems that he is kind to them. He's cordial. They have a good relationship. No doubt he is a good boss, someone to work for that you could trust, that's going to take care of you. But also notice both of them are pointing toward the Lord in this context, and that reaffirms a major theme of the book. Even though we don't see very often we don't see God speaking really at all, but we do see references to him throughout the text. And remember, Naomi had attributed everything. The Lord is the one who brought me back empty. The Lord is against me. His hand's gone out against me. Here now we see Boaz with that same kind of faith. He is pointing to the work of God. May the Lord be with you, he says to his workers. They say, may the Lord bless you. And so we get a good picture of Boaz as someone who was good to those who worked for him. All right, what else do we see about Boaz that's maybe interesting here? Verse 5, what do you see?
Notices Ruth.
Say again, Peggy?
He notices Ruth, a young woman.
Okay, very good. Now, maybe that doesn't seem odd to us, you know, if you come up to a place that's sort of got a pattern of normalcy and there's something different, you would perhaps notice that. But we do have to recognize this is in the ancient world, and so let's remind ourselves of something that's very different from our culture. How often were women noticed or thought of as that important in the ancient world?
Not much.
So for him to take notice of her, it seems to be more than just something's out of place, because he actually asks about her rather than just seeing her and ignoring her. because she's just a woman. I hate to say it that way, but that would be the attitude primarily of the ancient world. And so in this case, he not only notices her, but he goes to the foreman. That's not the word that's used here, but that's essentially what he is, the one that's in charge of all the reapers. He goes right to the top of his workers, and he wants some information. Do you know whose young woman is this? Now, I think that's also something a little interesting. Whose young woman is this? In other words, who does she belong to? Could refer to a couple of things. One could refer to the fact that she's a servant girl, and what he's asking is, who is her master? He could be asking that question. But he could also be asking, is she attached to anyone? Who is she connected to in terms of her kinship groupings? He may not be asking about marriage at least, but he's at least investigating something about her background. And again, that gives us a sense that Boaz is a man who cares about others. He wants to know some information about this young woman. And so his servant is going to give him an answer. And this is where we see a little bit of what's going to go on through the rest of this chapter and into chapter 3. And that is, we're going to get a picture of Boaz and his character. And then we're going to look at Ruth, and we're going to see her character. And what we're going to kind of see back and forth is that both of these people are people of integrity. Now, what's interesting about that is, again, we keep coming back to the very first verse of the book, because in what time did this story happen historically?
Famine.
The days of the judges. Mm-hmm. Is that a time where you expect to find a lot of people who have integrity and in some sense of moral character? Not typically a time where you'd expect that. And so the fact that we kind of go back and forth between these two in this unusual situation helps us to see that the author is really highlighting what would be, unfortunately, in that time, something unusual, people who have stellar moral character. Now, I want to diverge from the text just for a moment in light of the fact that Boaz has noticed a woman. Before we look at Ruth's character here, I do want to I said we would come back to this. I do want to connect with two things at the end of Judges real quick. So if you'll turn back to Judges 19,
I know, but
I want you to see this background because it's going to have a lot to do with what Boaz does next in the story.
That's good.
So in Judges 19, I'll just summarize quickly and then we'll get to the main point. We have the story of a Levite. That would be someone of the priestly tribe of Levi. And he's married to a woman from Bethlehem. But actually it tells us that she is a concubine to him. That means a second wife. We're not told exactly why he has taken a second wife. Typically in the ancient world, if a woman is barren, you would take a second wife to provide a male heir. That's not made completely clear. But then it tells us that this concubine, this second wife, has played the harlot. Again, not completely clear what that means. Does that mean that she has committed adultery against him? Does it mean that she has served as a cult prostitute in some Canaanite shrine? Not completely clear. But she's gone back home. And I want you to catch this. Where has she gone back to? Chapter 19, verse 2.
Bethlehem.
Yeah, she's gone back to Bethlehem. Well, that's interesting because where's the story of Ruth happening?
Bethlehem.
That's Bethlehem. So we have an interesting connection geographically here. The Levite's going to come down to his father-in-law's house and try to woo her back. And after some negotiations, finally they're going to leave on the way back up to the territory of Ephraim. And on the way, his servant's going to say to him, you know, the sun's about to go down. We probably should get into the confines of the walls of a city. This is very much the situation in third world countries today. You don't want to travel at night because that's when the thieves are out on the road. And so the servant says, hey, why don't we just turn into this city right here? And the Levites says, I don't want to go into that city. I want to go into a place that's our own territory, which is a little disturbing because in the book of Joshua, they were supposed to have conquered all of this territory. So if there's a city that doesn't belong to the people of Israel, that just reminds us of the disobedience of the tribes in not conquering it. So he says, let's go a little further. And they come to a little town in the territory of Benjamin. And they go into the town, and they go to the square of the city. And what they're asking for is hospitality. We need somewhere to stay. An old man, and the text makes this clear, an old man who is not from the city. He's actually in the city for the harvest. He's sojourning there. Sees them in the square. He says, hey, you better come to my house. Just don't stay in the square. So they go with him to his house, and they're eating and drinking together. And that's where I want to pick up in verse 22 and read a little bit. And I think you'll understand why this is significant to the background of Ruth. While they were celebrating, behold, the men of the city, certain worthless fellows, surrounded the house, pounding the door. They spoke to the owner of the house, the old man, saying, bring out the man who came into your house, that we may have relations with him. Then the man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not commit this act of folly. Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. Please let me bring them out that you may ravish them and do to them whatever you wish. But do not commit such an act of folly against this man. But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine, that would be, by the way, the Levite, seized his concubine and brought her out to them, and they raped her and abused her all night until morning. Then let her go at the approach of dawn. As the day began to dawn, the woman came and fell down at the doorway of the man's house where her master was until full daylight. When her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, then behold, his concubine was lying at the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, get up and let us go, but there was no answer. Then he placed her on the donkey, and the man arose and went to his home. When he entered his house, he took a knife and laid hold of his concubine and cut her in 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout the territory of Israel. Now, would you agree with me that's a pretty bizarre story?
Amen.
But let's take a few keys out of it. Remember what the man said when his servant, what the Levite said when his servant said, let's go into this city. And he said, I don't want to go into that city. That's not one of our cities. Let's go a little further and get into our own territory. So I want to make sure you understand, they're in the territory of the nation of Israel when this happens. Who committed this terrible crime? The men of the city did. They came asking for the man to be sent out so they could have homosexual relations with him. The old man says, don't do it. But look how poorly he values women. Take my virgin daughter. Take his concubine. Do what you want with them. And then the Levite steps in and says, here, don't worry about your daughter. Just take my concubine. And the men of the city rape her, abuse her, and ultimately kill her. And then he thinks so little of her, he cuts her body into pieces like an animal that he would be sacrificing to notify the other tribes of what has happened. So I think I'll just step back for a second and say this. Is it going to be a good thing to be a woman at this time?
No.
I don't like it.
When Ruth says to Naomi, I need to go out into the fields to glean. I'm going to go by myself and try to find somebody who will give me favor. Is she taking a pretty big risk there, you think?
Yes.
Yes.
Because, by the way, she's a Moabite as well. She's a foreign woman. And so you get a background here a little bit of what it's like to be a woman at this time in the time of Judges. All right, the other one is real quick, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly. But at the very end of Judges in chapter 21, the story goes on that once the rest of the tribes find out what happened in this little town in Benjamin, they decide they're going to punish Benjamin for the sins of these worthless men, and they go to war, and eventually they just about wiped out the entire tribe of Benjamin. There's only 600 men left, and the rest of the tribe say, we're not going to give our daughters in marriage to the tribe of Benjamin because they are so immoral. But then they begin to realize if we don't give wives to these men, then the tribe of Benjamin will die out and we'll lose one of the tribes. And so then they have a bright idea. But again, notice the background connected to women. And so we'll pick up reading here. Verse 16 in chapter 21. Then the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for wives for those who are left, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin? They said there must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin so that a tribe will not be blotted out from Israel. But we cannot give them wives of our daughters. In other words, we're not going to give them our own daughters, but we got to figure out where to get some wives for them. For the sons of Israel had sworn, saying, cursed is he who gives a wife to Benjamin. So they said, behold, there is a feast of the Lord from year to year in Shiloh, which is on the north side of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, on the south side of Levanah. And they commanded the sons of Benjamin, saying, go, lie in wait in the vineyards and watch. And behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to take part in the dances, then you come out of the vineyard, and each of you shall catch his wife from the daughters of Shiloh and go to the land of Benjamin. All right. So we're not going to give anybody wives, but we got a plan. You just go lie in wait in the vineyard, and when they come out dancing at the festival, you can go steal or kidnap one of these women for your wife.
Lovely.
It's crazy. The sad news is I'm not sure that our culture won't be that quite crazy in another couple of years with the way things are headed. But point being, Boaz sees a young woman back in Ruth chapter 2, and he inquires about her. Now, we don't know for sure why, but what would be a good guess based on already the relationship we see between Boaz and his men and the integrity that he's already been, the author's already told us that he has as a man of reputation? Can you guess maybe why he's thinking about this young woman? What maybe he worrying here?
Concerned about her safety.
What's going to happen to her? Who is she? You know, who does she belong to? Where is she protected in this situation? All right, so that gives us a much fuller picture of why Boaz is so concerned in light of the days in which this is happening. Now, let's go on and look at a little picture of Ruth that the servant gives us. The servant in charge of the reapers, verse 6, replied, she is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. Thus she came and has remained from the morning until now. She has been sitting in the house for a little while. Now, there is a little debate among scholars over what happens here. The text is not completely clear. She has asked Naomi that she may go glean in the field of one in whose favor or in whose eyes she may find favor. And so some scholars say that she actually went to the field and started gleaning already. But the New American Standard Translation actually, I think, is the better representation of that. It's not that she goes and immediately starts to glean as much as she's looking for one who will give her permission to glean. Why do I think she's seeking permission? Because look what the servant says in verse 7. What did she say?
Please
let me glean in the field. But notice this, she still hasn't started gleaning. It doesn't appear, because now she remained from the morning until now, and she's been sitting in the house a little while. I think the implication is that she's asked permission, but she's not willing to go into the field until the owner of the field will give permission himself. So in other words, she found the field. She thinks it's a suitable place. She's come to the servants, to the foreman, and made her intentions known. But now she's been here since the morning waiting in the house, she's waiting to get full permission from the owner of the field. And I think that would point to us a couple of things. First of all, she's a Moabite woman, so you wouldn't expect her to be disrespectful of the Israelites. Now, I could preach a whole sermon on this, but I don't have time for it. But would you agree we've got a bit of a culture now of entitlement in our country?
Definitely.
Where people don't say, please, I need some help. They say, hey, you're supposed to help me. I'm entitled to it.
Yep.
Now, had Ruth had that type of attitude, she may have come into the field and said, I'm going to be gleaning whether you like it or not, because Israel has gleaning laws for the stranger, and I'm a stranger, so get out of my way. But she doesn't do that at all. We see her character come out here. She's very respectful. She's willing to wait until she gets the permission that she needs. I would suggest to you that that's going to impress Boaz a little bit. Have you noticed how people of integrity are impressed by other people who show that same kind of character and integrity?
Yeah.
And so Boaz is finding out a little bit about her here that's going to help. Now, I'm not going to deal with this next section fully, but since we've set it up, let's just read a little bit more, and we'll come back and flesh the rest of this out fully next week. Verse 8, Then Boaz said to Ruth, Listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw. Now, we'll work through this in great detail next week, but what is essentially Boaz expressing to her?
He's going to take care of them.
He's going to take care of her. He basically said, can I say it like this? What he says in more words is, young lady, you've come to the right place. You've come to the right place. I'm going to take care of you. And so again, we get a picture of the character of Boaz here in light of the background of the days of the judges. He knows the risk. He knows the danger, and he's going to take care of her. And we'll see, by the way, that he's not just going to take care of her a little bit, but he's going to take care of her a lot. In fact, he's going to go overboard. Let's put it that way. He's going to go overboard in the care he provides for this young Moabite woman, to the point that she's going to be astounded. She can't believe it herself. And that's where we'll see again a picture of her character as well as his. So as we continue reading through this section, it's going to be kind of a back and forth for the next two chapters. Look at Boaz. What an upstanding man he is. Look at Ruth. What a great woman of character she is. And we're going to pull these two closer and closer together as God is working providentially behind the scenes to get them together and to resolve the problem for Naomi that she has in this situation, her emptiness, if you will. So we'll stop there for today. I would encourage you to keep on reading. Go back through it starting at verse 8 this week and just look for specific things that he does for Ruth that we can discuss next week, specific examples of how he's providing this care for her that is unexpected, but of course is, I think, reflective of God's care for Naomi in the story. All right, well, let's pray and ask God to bless us as we go. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to study. Lord, we thank you for the ways we see your hand at work in this narrative, Lord. Just bringing Boaz into contact with Ruth and Ruth into contact with Boaz, and both of them being people of character. God, we see how you are preparing the way in this story to accomplish your goodwill, to bring Naomi back to fullness after the emptiness of her losses, but also, Lord, to set up an incredible reality for the future in the coming of Jesus, your Messiah. And so, God, as we continue working through these texts, I pray you'd give us hope that, Lord, if you can work these situations in the narrative about Ruth and Naomi in such a way to bring about your will, that, Lord, you can work the situations of our lives in a way that will allow what looks like nothing good could come from to become a part of the ways that you bless your people. And so, Lord, help us to have that faith this week as we encounter the ongoing trial of the COVID crisis, as we encounter the ongoing divisions and struggles in our culture. Lord, help us to trust that you are working these things to accomplish your good will in ways that maybe we can't fully understand right now, but Lord, that we trust. And so we thank you for the ways you're going to continue to bless us and help us as you helped Ruth and Naomi, Lord. Bring that one into our lives, God, that will be the source of blessing as Boaz was to them. And help us to be truly thankful, God, as we live in light of your great grace. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. It's going to be good. Don't miss. We got a great story to come. Just gets better every time you read a little more, doesn't it?
It is.
Y'all have a good week.
You too.
Pray for us at North Greenville this week. Pray for me and my shield. I don't know what that's going to be like.
I do.
Maybe I'll do the Darth Vader breathing thing, you know. All right, we'll see y'all.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.